Hello, and welcome again to Know Connect Thrive, the podcast. We are so lucky to have with us today community member Betsy Matarrita. Hi, Betsy. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm doing great.
Good to see you
How about
today.
you?
And we have two experts in Marfan syndrome and related conditions with us. Longtime volunteer Dr. Alan Braverman. How are you this morning, Alan?
Great, April Dawn. Thank you for inviting us to be with you.
Absolutely. And Siddharth Prakash. How are you doing, Dr. Prakash?
Great, April Dawn. Thank you for inviting me as well.
Well, we feel lucky to have all three of you here. So, if you can just talk to us a little bit, first of all, I'll start with you, Alan. Do you want to just tell us where you work and your connection to the Marfan Foundation? We know it's one in many years.
Sure. I'm a professor of medicine and cardiology at Washington University in St. Louis School of Medicine. And I've been a volunteer for the Marfan Foundation for over 30 years. I've been fortunate to serve on the board of directors and on the professional advisory board. And I have great collaboration with partners all over the world, including my friend Siddharth, in exercise and physical activity and trying to help people live their best lives. And I've been fortunate to work with people around the country and around the globe on scientific statements and guidelines to help people understand recreation and competitive physical activities with heritable thoracic disease, including the most recent update, which was just published in January 2026. So really, really happy that we're going to talk about this today.
Yeah, we can't wait to dive in and learn more. And Siddharth, I know you're instrumental in a lot of that. Do you want to also tell us a little bit about your professional affiliations and what you've been working on?
Sure. I'm professor of internal medicine here at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, where I've directed the aortopathy clinic for the last 15 years. And in doing so, I began to become interested in exercise as related to questions by my patients around 5 years ago, and have been doing both clinical studies and also long kind of policy guided and community-based exercise studies since that time to develop a real understanding about patient concerns around exercise and how we can best, as clinicians, monitor and support our community when it comes to exercise and healthy activities.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure turning to Betsy, that is music to your ears. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, Betsy, just kind of a synopsis of your Marfan journey, how you learned you had the condition, and kind of just give us a quick flavor. We'll dive into it more later on in the discussion. Quick flavor of why physical activity has become so important to you.
Yeah, of course. Well, I am 37 years old and I was diagnosed when I was 2 or 3.
Hmm.
I've been under medication for my heart condition since then, never had any surgeries so far. But I've had my back to correct my scoliosis when I was 9. And
Hmm.
also a few eye surgeries here and there just to fix my detached lenses. I've been a volunteer for the foundation for 9 years. It's gonna be this year. Um, and my mindset is just to live the best life you can with the limitations that you have. So, and as I became older, I became more aware of how important physical activity is, more so when you have like joint conditions,
Hmm.
because movement is really important. And as you get older, it gets um, it gets more complicated to move, right? So I decided to start looking for something that will work for me, and that's where Pilates came to my life. But we will get deeper on that topic later. But it's been life changing for me.
That's amazing. And we'd be remiss to not say Betsy also works as a consultant for the foundation and is helming a lot of our Spanish language social media, in addition to all her fantastic volunteer work. So, Betsy, we are so grateful to have you with us and so grateful for everything you do. So, Dr. Braverman, Betsy kind of hit on it, began to touch on it. Historically, we know that folks living with our conditions, particularly, say, even 10 years ago, we're really often told, especially maybe by non-expert physicians and providers, don't do much, right? Don't move around much. PE for your child, no. Um, what are you hearing from your patients today? What are they looking for? And how has the guidance begun to evolve so that people can be more physically active and feel better.
First, Betsy, thanks for sharing that information. It was a very helpful backdrop to what we're going to talk about today. So just as you said, April, Dawn, I can remember the foundation being part of a campaign almost 30 years ago with a beautiful poster of people playing basketball, just a pickup game of basketball and how that could be a health hazard. And that was really the mantra years back about something as simple as that. And that really pushed the pendulum really to one side, very, very restrictive as far as physical activity. And what we've learned over the last 10, 15 years, and especially over the last 5 years with work that the Siddharth is doing and researchers are doing with animal models, and then just collecting observations, is that movement and physical activity for the vast majority of people with a heritable condition is low risk and certainly safe. And that really just as Betsy said, really taking a person-centric approach, because one type of activity will not fit all. We can say, you should walk and do this and that, but somebody's eyes or joints or back or feet will say, well, that's great for you, but I like to swim, or I
Right.
like to do yoga or Pilates or something else that's just totally different. And I think, the sense or the worry that the aorta is somehow an eggshell that's going to crack or break or have some sort of catastrophic event during normal life, that physical activity is somehow going to accelerate that. We don't really have that information. So for the vast majority of physical activity, you really want to emphasize doing things and having movement, just as Betsy said. Now, Betsy, I would say you're young. You're in your 30s, so you have a long life ahead, and movement for the next 50 years, it could be very important for you.
Yeah, great. That's why I became really into it because I'm young now, but I'm getting older and I want to be able to move with ease as I get older.
So Betsy, how has that evolved for you over time, right? I know you're kind of really passionate about Pilates now.
Mhm.
How did you start when you kind of had this desire to feel better and move more and have more joint health and just physical health overall? Where did you begin for folks who may not know where to begin?
Yeah. Well, I would say that in my 20s, I was very lazy and I didn't want to do anything. Also, because with Marfan syndrome, I always felt like physical activity will be risky for me,
Right.
no matter what I did. So I just put it on the back of my priority list. But then when I hit 30, that's when I was like, I think I should start doing something. And I tried everything. Trust me. I tried just going for walks.
Hmm.
I tried going to the gym, um, just walking in the treadmill or doing spinning or yoga. But it turns out that yoga didn't work because you have to be really flexible. And because of my scoliosis surgery, I have a lot of mobility limitation. So
Hmm.
it didn't work for me. Um, and I'm going to be honest, it was really frustrating at some point because I was like, I really want to do this, but nothing is working. And then almost 2 years ago, oh, I also tried swimming. I loved it, but it was kind of expensive. So I was like, I don't know. It has to be a balance. And then 2 years ago, a Pilates studio opened near to my home. So I decided to try that.
Wow.
And it changed my life. Like the
Wow.
fact that I got into the studio and the coach was like, okay, do you have any movement limitations I should be aware of? And I was like, yeah, I had this and this surgery and I have this medical condition. She was like, okay, that's no problem. We can do some changes to the exercises, no worries. And she actually did. Like they were really paying attention to me and the movement and if I was doing it right or just correcting me. Um, and I haven't stopped
Mhm.
because I also I liked it so much so that I was able to start building that consistency that you really need to
Great.
keep going.
Yeah.
And it's been 19 months of me
Uh,
doing Pilates twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And I've seen the changes in my body. Like I travel a lot. A lot of people from the community know that. And that's where I first noticed the changes. Because when I traveled before Pilates, I will get really, really tired and my body will be sore after like walking at the airport, right?
Right.
And then after I started doing Pilates, I don't get sore at all because I've been able to build that muscle, I guess. And I know that's hard to believe with Marfan because, like, you know, connective tissue disorder, but I've seen it like in my arms. I see my arms before Pilates and after Pilates, and you can see like a little muscle building in. So, yeah. And not also that, but like also my mental health
Hmm.
been crucial because it's also a place where I've learned to accept and love my body for what it can do and know what cannot do.
I think you hit on something that's just so critical there. I mean, I know lots of us in the community and the staff of the foundation, volunteers, have been like kind of watching your journey on social media, and you can just sort of feel the difference in you. So congratulations for that. And Siddharth, I know you're just as passionate about helping our community through these kinds of moments that Betsy's talking about, and it inspires a lot of the work that you do. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the research you've been doing with folks like Alan and kind of what you've learned, even for people that may have had aortic dissections, about what can be safe and how important movement can be.
Yes. First of all, hearing your story, Betsy, is really inspiring to me personally because I often get that feeling from my patients as well. And so that kind of echoes the things that I'm seeing in clinic on a regular basis. When people come in and they're frustrated, they've been told certain things that might be conflicting or even confusing from one provider or another provider, or they go on the internet and they read something terrible and they get very anxious because of all that swirling around them. And then to see them get confidence and really feel pride in their activities is one of the great joys in my practice because that impacts so many things, physical, mental health, as you said. And it really
Hmm.
also informed my approach to how we were studying exercise as more of a holistic treatment related to the patient's underlying condition, their overall health, rather than as a single prescription by itself. And that's so important when in the way that we discuss activities and exercise with our patients. It's part of their overall treatment, and it needs to be considered along with everything else that we talk about as providers, like imaging and medications.
So you're saying even for folks with genetic aortic conditions, the idea of physical activity as sort of part of the whole medicine, right? Like the treatment picture, it's important. Where people may have heard in the past it isn't, it is important.
Absolutely. And I've come to believe that this is something that we as clinicians should embrace and in our practices and really mention that as part of the treatment and not just as kind of a separate endeavor. This is intimately associated with someone's physical and mental journey. And we need to be, first of all, aware of what's going on in that area, but
Hmm.
also to try and influence things positively because it can have such an influence on the other aspects of things that we all care about, including, we think, aortic health as well. So that's how we really designed our studies is to try to investigate the impact of exercise on physical and mental health, as well as confidence to engage in activities and follow up, including adherence to things like medications and other treatments. Because we think that when people are engaged in activities and feeling better, they also are more likely to take care of themselves in other aspects of things like medications, following up in clinic, and doing a lot of things that frankly are unpleasant to do when you are living with an aortic condition.
Right.
So I think it spills over into those areas. And as an example of that,
Yeah.
when when we were initially starting this process, there really wasn't a whole lot of evidence published for people who are in the community like Betsy and wanted to start exercising. There was some limited evidence from people who were engaged in cardiac rehabilitation programs, but those are, of course, quite rare, relatively speaking, and they were confined to people who had recent surgeries and were in the hospital. And so they're not practical for a lot of people. We wondered, how safe actually is exercise in community living adults who, and how do we go about monitoring them and ensuring their safety and making sure that this is part of their regular kind of touch points with their physicians. And
Right.
so a lot of the studies and the clinical trial that we did was focused on adults living in the community who wanted to exercise. Can they do it with limited resources at home? Can they be monitored how do we monitor them best? And how do we determine, the proper targets? Like what should the goals of exercise be? How do we individualize that in a way that makes sense for our patients? And what we've learned from 5 years now is that exercise is in the overwhelming majority of cases is not only safe, but it's quite effective, even
Hmm.
in small doses that people can individualize. For example, over half of the people in our clinical trial, where we followed around 100 individuals for
Hmm.
1 year, told us that they made some modifications to their exercises in order to be able to continue to perform them and to feel confident in them and gain traction in exercise over time. And we also found that they generally did not need to be monitored more frequently than people who are not exercising, that they could attend their
Wow.
regular clinic visits.
That's
And
amazing.
in the background of all their other clinical activities, they did quite well, in taking up this exercise and felt more confident to engage in exercise at the end of the day. And so this has really given us momentum to look at this in a new perspective.
Yeah.
Can we really reach people where they are, identify things that they need in their lives to become more active? And can we incorporate this as part of a holistic treatment for people with aortic disease? Ultimately, what we're really interested in
Hmm.
as aortic cardiologists is, does this, just the inclusion of exercise along with all the other things that we're doing, really make a difference in their aortic health over time? And that's something that will take years to really figure out, but it's something that we're embarking on now. And we hope to have that answer relatively soon.
That is so encouraging to hear. I mean, I could almost get teary-eyed hearing that, being as close to the community as we all are. And Betsy, I want to hear from you now. What does it mean to you, kind of on an emotional level, to hear Alan, to hear Siddharth, and to know that this is a focus of the Marfan Foundation, that this is a focus of volunteer researchers, that this is a focus in the wider world? How does that feel after kind of a lifetime of conflicting information and almost feeling unsafe with physical activity?
That's really hopeful. I think that's the word. Because again, for years I was really, really scared that if I would do something um, for movement, I will hurt myself or I will make my condition worse. So knowing that there are some research and studies with information that back up that it's safe for us to start doing something, it's really hopeful and it's like a bright future even for like younger generations too, because they're gonna grow up with a different wire in their brains. Like, okay, we can do this in a safe way, of course. Um, but yeah, I think it's really really hopeful.
So, Alan, let me turn to you. If you're talking to a patient, that's newly diagnosed or they just learned their child has, Marfan-Loeys-Dietz-Veds, what would be your kind of roadmap for how do you begin to figure out with your provider what is and isn't safe in a particular patient situation? How do they start that process?
So I mean, the initial awareness that someone has a genetic condition that can affect, wide aspects of one's being, it can be overwhelming. So really, it's a whole journey. So the first visit might encompass just a lot of education about the condition and things like that, and then really it's a discussion about, what do you want to talk about now?
Hmm.
What have we not talked about? What are you worried about? And that starts the whole process because different people have different levels of acceptance and awareness and worry at all sorts of aspects, from the most catastrophic, like after an aortic dissection, to, I was just diagnosed because someone determined I had a dislocated lens. What does that mean in the whole process? And but to the point about physical activity, when that's part of the equation, is just as Siddharth said, um, many times first thing you read online or you get advice for someone who's really trying to be helpful, it may not be the proper advice
Hmm.
for you. And I've gone to a pattern over the last so many years of saying, what do you like to do? Tell me what you want to do. What are you doing now, and how can we incorporate that into going forward, as opposed to being restrictive? Because that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to stop somebody in their tracks when they've been doing things very successfully for a long time. Parents worry about their children. Children worry about their parents. I mean, that's
Hmm.
what we all do, and you can just see it in people's eyes how accepting and um, how grateful they are when you say, yes, you can do that. Yes, it's totally fine for you to do that. Please do that. You can do more than that. Very, very uplifting. So that's really the goal. What do you like to do? How can we make it work for you? It's the way on one end of the spectrum, the elite athlete that's diagnosed with a condition, in the zenith of health at the highest level. So that's the ones that get attention. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's a whole different group to talk about. The vast majority of our community just want to be active. They want to be physically active, and we want them to. So,
Right.
with people like Siddharth leading the charge and doing really important studies, going to change this world. And with our community members like Betsy taking the charge and spreading the word, I mean, that's really what it's all about, living a long, healthy life. I mean, there will be ups and downs and challenges, but but movement is important physically, but probably more important mentally, and certainly important socially, from the youngest child to the oldest adult. And I think movement is life. So that's really what we really try to emphasize.
I love that movement is life. That is a great mantra, I think, for a lot of us to shift the dialogue around, right? So let me ask, since we're on the topic of younger people, the pediatric aortopathy statement that came out in 2024 through the American Heart Association, many of the authors were our Marfan Foundation volunteers, longtime volunteers. You talk about that one-on-one conversation. Siddharth, Alan, either of you, do you want to kind of share a little bit about that customization and where those guidelines kind of open the door a little bit more for conversation between parents and providers? Siddharth, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, so I'll preface this by saying I'm an adult cardiologist, so I don't talk about this with the kids so much, but I do find that the pediatric aortopathy guidelines provide a helpful framework for these discussions, because they don't focus on individual activities as much as the adult guidelines do,
Hmm.
but they really give you an idea about healthy exercise practices that are kind of universal, and I really use that in counseling patients about exercise. I also feel like the emphasis on non-aortopathy risks is worth discussing, because there are, as we mentioned, dislocated lenses and other kinds of joint concerns, and Betsy's concern about what to do after back surgery or
Right.
any people with joint issues. Those are often equally part of the conversation, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. I think that points to something Alan said, which I really take to heart, which is this is a collaboration. It's a collaboration between the clinician and the patient, and you really need to find out where they want to go and help them get there. And this should be an attitude of what can I do to help meet your needs and help serve you better, rather than prescribing or restricting like we often talk about with exercise. I think it's a kind of a joint activity that everyone is engaged in at the visit. And that seems to make it help go better. And I think the pediatric aortopathy guidelines also enforce that aspect, which I like. I like that way of thinking about exercise.
Yeah. And we're lucky. I think one of the great things about this discussion is that other providers, healthcare providers, will hear you and Alan talking in these ways and maybe, begin to take a closer look at this idea of customization and conversation per patient versus a cookie cutter type of approach. And, let's talk about some of the harder aspects of this for a moment, though. I know that some of the previous guidelines were really based on like more competitive sports, elite athletes. That was part of why they didn't necessarily work for folks like Betsy, who are looking to just engage in more routine, healthful, mental health, physical activity, right? Um, but that said, we do have folks that call us all the time that say, my son was playing football, my daughter was playing hockey. I'm told that's no longer safe. So, where are the places when we're talking about things like contact sports, whether it's for the aorta, which of course is our kind of our focus today with you two here, but just the whole physicality? Alan, do you want to start with that, where there really are still some things we have to be super careful about to keep everyone safe?
Yes. Well, first thing I would say is we really need more data on what when we talk about what is safe and what is not safe, because m most of the information really comes down to consensus or expert opinion or an opinion of people in the field based on what we think, could be possible. And that's led to a lot of the things that you just said about, for instance, American style football or wrestling or something like that. When I uh, uh, go to the annual family conference of the Marfan Foundation and talk to groups of middle school and high school students. Every time there's a group of people that have a genetic aortic condition that are actively playing high school varsity competitive sports, contact and collision. And of course, nothing's happened to them. They're still fine, etc. We see people that done that their whole lives, and we
Mhm.
meet them with diagnosis in middle age and beyond for the first time. And then they wonder about their children and things like that. And so we really don't know is the honest truth. What the consequences would be when somebody's aorta is being monitored and is relatively okay, et cetera, on treatment to do those activities. It's really a matter of trying to, use a common sense approach based on a holistic thing. And not everybody's the same. There are people with the same condition at the same age that have a much different risk because their tissues are different, their
Right.
genotype is different, et cetera. So that's the sort of the thing that we want to emphasize is what is your underlying condition? What is your health like? What would you like to do? And then it's really a matter of what we now call the shared decision making as opposed to a restrictive pattern, a paternalistic sort of approach where you can or can't do something. And that's the framework that was emphasized in the pediatric statement, in the pediatric sports participation statement by the sports cardiology section in 2025, and
Mhm.
then in the adult competitive sports, it even says for heritable thoracic disease with normal aorta, shared decision making on participation at the highest levels, even. And we just don't know. So I think more information is going to help us with that.
That's really great information, I think, for average folks in the community to understand that it's a lot of this is a matter of your personal physical state and talking with your providers and figuring out what's possible. So, as we begin to wrap toward the end here, I'll start with you, Betsy, because your lived experience in this kind of trumps everything else that we're talking about today. If you had, I know from my seat listening to all this, it sounds like some of the takeaways are talk to your expert provider. Make sure you have an expert provider. You can use our institutional directory if you're trying to find one or contact Help and Resource Center. We'll put that information down below. But make sure you have an expert in front of you and that you have that shared decision making kind of conversation, that it's your personal kind of customized situation that you need to look at with your providers. And that in general, activity, when well thought out, is a good thing for most people. That sounds like a couple of the takeaways. But Betsy, for you, what's kind of your pro tip for folks that are listening today that may be new to all this? What would you leave them with if you had to pick kind of one thing in summary?
Of course, I would say don't compare your movement journey to anyone else's,
Hmm.
because with Marfan syndrome, progress looks different for everybody. And also find activities that feel safe, supportive, and sustainable for you.
Hmm.
Um, Once you find that, build that consistency, not intensity. And finally, I would say just listen to your body, because that is always a win. For me, sometimes I'm really excited to go to Pilates and I cannot wait, but there's been some instances in which I've had to listen to my body, like, yes, I want to go, but I'm not feeling it today. And
Right.
that's okay.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with it. So yeah, and just give it a try. I know it could be frustrating, but I'm telling you, once you find your thing,
Hmm.
you're gonna love it, and you're not gonna stop. You're gonna feel so good. You want to keep doing it.
I love the safe, supportive, and sustainable. I think we're going to have to start calling that Betsy's three S's. I like it. That sounds like an infographic to me, Betsy. Siddharth, same question for you. What's your big takeaway for folks to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I would say something that Alan touched on is, and Betsy just mentioned, is that exercise is fluid. It can change over time. What your personal sweet spot is may change as you get stronger, you build confidence. Maybe your goals can shift. And so it's important to have this continual feedback where you are kind of reassessing things. It's important not to just assume that what was okay maybe 6 months or a year ago is going to be the same now. So I would say continue this dialogue with your clinician and with yourself. Ask yourself, am I okay? Do I need to adjust my approach based on new circumstances? Because you are changing, and that's okay. That's normal. That's part of all of our lives. But it's important to recognize that here.
So move alongside your changing situation. It's a great tip, Siddharth. Thank you. And Alan, we'll give you the final word on all this. What would you hope folks can take away from today's talk?
I hope everybody sets their own goals and takes an individual approach. Doesn't matter what the person next to you is doing on the treadmill or the bicycle or in the pool. Movement. So just as Betsy said, start somewhere and then move forward. And there'll be days where you have a lot of wind behind you, and there'll be other days. So maximize the good days and enjoy yourself. I expect you to live a long life. So physical activity is going to be a very important part of your bone health, your mental health, your cardiovascular health, and sedentary lifestyle doesn't cut it anymore. So get out there and move. We'll help you.
All right. Well, thank you all. And again, I should say, of course, and I'm sure that the docs on this call will agree with me, always before you take part in any sort of physical activity, always check with your expert providers, make sure that things are in good shape so that you don't put yourself at risk. But that said, what a positive, optimistic discussion we've had. So grateful to each of you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Betsy. Great to be with you today. And we'll see you next time for No Connect Thrive podcast. Take good care.